Now we welcome to the program Gary Rentz and his daughter Jill Dean. So Gary is Nancy Cooper's father, Brad Cooper's former father-in-law, and the grandfather of Nancy and Brad's two daughters. Jill is Nancy's younger sister and, of course, aunt to her children. They both live in Canada. This is where Gary and his wife Donna raised their four children. Nancy was an identical twin to sister Krista. So I first met the family during the search for Nancy. The entire family rushed to Cary, North Carolina almost immediately when she was reported missing. I got to know them through the investigation and the trial and eventually interviewed them for a book that I wrote on the case called Love Lies. Gary and Jill, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And I've got to tell you right away, when I first met you guys, and I had covered many cases before of missing people, I was so impressed by your bond with each other, by your obviously love for Nancy, and your desire and tenacity to get to the truth despite all of the stuff that was going around you. Nobody knows what it's like to be in your position. That is not something that anybody chooses, and it's not something that there's a handbook, to tell you what to do. And I think very often when you're in this situation, it's just kind of a whirlwind, right? And you forget, or at least we forget sometimes in the media, to really talk about the person who's at the center of this, which is Nancy. So if you guys could each just share a little bit about Nancy so our listeners could understand who she was.
Okay.
You go first.
Well, Nance was a twin, as you suggested, and little Freudian perhaps, but they were an unusual combination because there was a main flow that went to Nance and a shunt off the main flow where Krista was born. And I always thought that Krista was less confident than Nance. Nance was a leader, a very confident, and tended to gravitate people around her. So she was a bit of a leader all her life, good athlete, average student, great person. So
Yeah. I think of her, I just kind of idolized her, I think, most of my life. So my siblings are quite a bit older than me, and I really just appreciated how she was really an adult by the time I was 9 or 10. And she always took time to come back and made me feel special, made all of my big life events, took time to make my friendships important to her. It really has informed how I want to live as an adult and be a part of the important little people in my life. And in the end, I think that's what I miss about her the most. And I think about her, it's always just right under the surface. I think about her all the time.
So Jill, you were fairly young when this happened. I mean, this happened in July of 2008. First of all, how did you both learn about it? And Jill, remind me how old you were at the time.
Oh my goodness. 8. So I was, how old am I? I was mid-20s.
yeah,
mid-20s.
Okay.
And I'm not telling you that because I don't want to tell you my age. I just really don't remember. I think I was 25.
You were born in 81, so 19 and 8.
Somewhere in your 20s. And Gary, I know that you and Donna were at a funeral, right? And you get a call from North Carolina.
Yeah, and Krista called. She had already talked to Jeff and I think to Jill. And she said, Nance went for a run and didn't come back, hasn't come back. And so I got the call during the service. I answered after the service and told this to Donna. And I said, I think this is a story that will not have a happy ending. Nance and Brad had been going through some tough times maritally. And the behaviors just said that they weren't in a great spot.
Yeah.
And so we heard that on the Saturday, the 7th, the 8th, I guess, of July. and Chris flew and drove down from Toronto. We left on Sunday night, Monday morning, and Jeff left Tuesday. So we were all down by Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, that had to be, it was just a family decision, right? There was no question. We're going. We're all going.
Well, actually, everybody made their own, but we all made the same decision.
Yeah. I think I was furniture shopping when I heard. So I was with my husband and I looked at my phone and I had a ton of missed calls, and it was like my sister over and over again, and some friends, and then it was like some of her friend Nancy's friends, and then I remember just trying to call my parents and knowing they were in a funeral, but we were, I think, all just trying to get a hold of them. And I don't know, I was trying to like remain calm about the situation. Like, she has Crohn's disease, maybe she got sick, maybe she fell on the trail. Like, has anyone talked to Brad? I just remember going through these steps of trying to figure out immediately if there was an alternative, because you're just hoping that there's something else that could have happened. And I do remember very clearly, like, Kristen knew right away, and she immediately like got in a car and started driving there because she just knew right away that she couldn't feel her, which is like a twin thing.
Yeah.
And right away she felt like she wasn't on Earth anymore. And I was, which I think is kind of like my role when you think about family roles. Like, I'm like, everybody calm down, everything's fine, we're gonna be fine. And yeah, I think it's one of those things where you're so panicked. And for me, when they came back and we were trying to organize a flight and we were sitting at their dining room table, I just remember vividly before they went down to North Carolina, like, Dad looking at me and being like, this isn't gonna have a happy ending. And you just kind of knew.
Yeah, I mean, that was my next question, but you kind of answered it. So you already had these inclinations that something terribly wrong had happened, that this was not the norm, that she would not run off, and that this was a very safe area. So this seemed really not just out of the norm, but of course out of character for anything strange to be happening to her. So you get there and you talk to the police, and then you immediately are ushered in, I mean, pretty quickly, right, into this press conference.
I think it was Dawn and I pulled in on the Monday afternoon, and Adam Desmix and Jim Young were at the airport. So they picked us up and took us to the police station, and Chris was already there. And we met with Chief Basemore, Adam and Jim, and they started to discuss the case. And Jess and Hannah gave us their side of the story. They were good friends at Nan's down there. And they said they had both called that afternoon, and Brad didn't have an answer, just said she wasn't there, and that was unusual. So that started the pot to boil. Jill got the short straw, so she got to manage things while all of us were gone, because if we had all departed in a big hurry, we'd had some trouble at the office. So Jill got the short straw on that one and stayed home.
But again, you're all on the same page in terms of thinking this is not right, something's going on here, and you get this information from police, this back and forth from the friends, and then you have to go sit in front of a wall of TV cameras and reporters, and that had to be pretty daunting, because again, I always say this, nobody signs up for this, and there is no handbook to know how you handle this. I mean, you guys handled it beautifully, but how did you feel about that? I mean, I guess at that moment you felt like the media might help find her, might help, put the information out there.
Yeah, and I just felt that we had to talk to folks in the community and the media, And the first one was fairly small. You were there, and there was a couple of local stations. And by the time we got to the second and third, we had gone from about 3 to maybe 10, and then the room was full. If you recall, that was quite we had all the major networks were there. But I really felt that Pat Bazemore handled it respectfully, and we leaned a lot on Susan Moran, who was town employee, but just an absolute gem, a really good friend still. And she helped us get ready and visualize what was coming. And the thing was managed so well that we didn't feel under stress. And we just felt we needed to tell the story of Nan, who she was, and what we felt. And so we did.
Tell me about when you first, I know I believe there was maybe a prayer circle at the Lutheran church, and Brad was there, and that he acted very strangely towards your family. And I think Donna was specifically felt very uncomfortable. She said she hugged him and there was something very odd.
Yeah, that was the Tuesday. So we got in there Monday. We had that first little session with the police. There was no press at that point, just us and the police. And on Tuesday, we went to the Lutheran church because that's what the community got together. They were doing a community search. And partway, just as we were getting set to go out and search, Jeff had just nicely arrived. And they said, no, we're going to call off today because they found a body. And we're going to wait and find out what's going on. So Donna went over and gave Brad a hug, and he was sitting in an alcove by himself in a crowded room, non-communicative. And Donna said, there's something strange with this guy today. And
Yeah,
so,
she got a feeling as a mom. And so all this time, Jill, you're still back in Canada, right? Okay, because you're running the
Yeah.
office, the family business. So
And I mean, but it is important. I think that people don't understand that we were really close right up to the very end. So this isn't somebody who we didn't have a relationship with. And I know, like, when I think about family violence, that's something that I think is like important for people to understand who might be listening, that that person kind of shows you who they want you to see. And when you're in a relationship with someone, we all make excuses for people and, make excuses for these behaviors that are a little bit strange. And Brad was a person who really kept to himself and wasn't like this outgoing, gregarious person a lot of the time. But he was normally very comfortable around us. But I do think, you use like the term like eccentric or terms like that. And then when you learn other things about somebody, you realize their problem behaviors and things are a little bit different.
yeah, and I mean, I think before we even move ahead with the chronology, I think that is important. Brad was somebody that you accepted, you embraced. He came into your family, and even if Nancy wasn't going to be with him in marriage, he was still the father of your grandchildren. And so you all loved him. I mean, you accepted him for who he was. So believing that he might be involved in this had to be really, really difficult.
it was, but there had been a set of behaviors that I'll throw on the table at this point, because we had been down, Donna and I went down to visit Nance and Brad in June, and we went to, with some of her friends, we ended up going down to one of the Gulf Islands just off Myrtle Beach. So we were down and spent time, and Nance was really limited in fuel for the car, in money. It was just really under control. And at the end of this, she took us to the airport and quite tearfully said, "Mom, I just want to come home," and couldn't, because they had been dealing with separation and realized that we had to get permission of Brad to leave the country. We could have just put him on a plane and gone. But then you're putting yourself in a complex position. So we kind of left uncomfortably, and within a month, we had reached 8th of July. So,
So there's a massive search for Nancy, right? I mean, just massive. The neighborhood, the community. I mean, people were on bikes. People were walking the woods with dogs. There were helicopters. I don't think we had drones back then, but I mean, there was just about every day until she was found. There were just hundreds of people out there. And so then she is found by basically a dog walker, somebody who's not part of the search, who just happens to be in this spot. How did you get the word, and did you know right away in your gut? Did you say right away, this is Nancy?
Yes. And so chronologically, the first press conference was the Monday or the Tuesday. On the Wednesday one, we left the press conference and went to visit Nan's lawyer, Alice Stubbs, and put our heads together and swore out an affidavit, and Alice took it over to the family court, and they gave us the right to apprehend the kids, which is one of the things we needed to do, because we thought if Brad had behaved this way toward Nancy, then what would it say if we left the kids there? So we acted pretty quickly to get the kids to safety, and that was the start of that side, because at that point we were convinced.
When I think the part about finding her, which is your question, I wasn't there, but it was very late at home, and I had gotten a call earlier from like my dad saying they found somebody, and just kind of stay by your phone, like, oh, we'll be in touch kind of thing. And I remember what part of the house I was in. I remember everything I was doing. I just collapsed, because I think in your heart, although you think hearing it is very different. And it's so final. I think you spend those days kind of hoping and being unrealistic with yourself that there could be a possible another outcome, or, and I think you just try to stay hopeful. And immediately, when you hear that, it's just your whole life changes.
It's like a bomb, right? It's like your whole life's imploded in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think we both covered a part of it. I think Jill's part is important, that your hope part says, gee, maybe something, maybe there's a miracle or something that can happen. I'm hopeful, but not optimistic. And then the other side of you says, but there are other things you have to do. And so you got to face what are the next steps, and that's the lawyer and the custody and the kids and all of that stuff has to come into the fore. So, and you're stuck with both sides playing.
Yeah, I mean, Gary, I remember I always thought, as I watched you and your family navigate this, that they were so lucky to have somebody like you who was kind of doing all the logistical, kind of leading that, because your family was broken. I mean, your family was devastated, and somebody, like you said, needed to do that. You go through this emergency custody, and you get the emergency custody, but then immediately that case starts to build, that family law case.
Yes.
And part of that is interviewing all these friends and friends that knew them, and friends that lived in the neighborhood, and friends that interacted with them. And you start to learn, although you did suspect, a lot of things about the control, and the control over her, and what she was not able to do and not allowed to do. And again, a lot of people, like you said, Jill, don't understand that domestic violence is so many other things. There's so many other layers to it. What are some of the things that you learned through the custody case about the control?
Well, I think it's a retrospective perspective, but when you drove to Nance and Brad's house, the front was pristine and the back was untouched. And so there's the public image and the private life. It could not be more clear than it was at the house. And yet, and so that was part of the public image for Brad, you know, the family and the home in a good part of town, and but then not wanting to maintain that with the kind of attention, care, and
Yeah, and remind me that you're talking about the backyard. I mean, there was no grass. It was a mess. And so
and
that's a good example of, as long as people can't see it, it's okay.
yeah,
Well, and I think in a lot of times, I mean, even in the women I deal with in the program now, like I don't think there's a client who comes through who doesn't have some type of family court issue going on, some type of legal control happening. And that, unfortunately, is a lot of times the partner who has the resources has the power in the court system. And you find that these mothers are just trying to do what's best for their kids. So a lot of times they'll go back because they want their kids to stay in the school system, and they don't want to uproot their lives, and they're trying to, you know, minimize the damage for their families. And I would say that was probably pretty on par with what Nancy was doing. She wasn't,
that's true.
I don't think she wanted to worry us, and I think she wasn't sharing a lot of details. And also, when you are in a marriage and you haven't really like made a firm decision yourself, and maybe she had, that, you know, then she goes back and my friends are here, and my kids are secure here. And so I think you know what she's ready to share at that moment. So you go, I think, and I see for myself going through that court process, I really felt like, oh, there was a lot that we didn't know.
Right. Jill, if you could lean a little bit to the right, just to, yeah. Oh, yeah. Perfect. We want to see your beautiful face. You know, and so what I recall from reading all of the documents in the custody case, which I did, was, you know, controlling of the finances, not allowing access to a car, or if you have a car, no access to gas, controlling how much she interacted with her family, with certain friends. So all of these things, and specifically controlling the money. I mean, I think the money is the thing, because if you can't buy food, or you can't buy things for your children, or you can't buy gas, you have no freedom. And this is compounded by the fact that she was not an American citizen, right? That
Well, yeah.
that she didn't have the options, like you said, Gary, to just jump on a plane and just run back to Canada. They finally, after all of this, amazingly, this case, the family court case, really helped the investigators make a criminal case, right? Because he sat for this very long deposition, which, you know, Alice was leading. And a lot of that, your attorney, Alice Stubbs, a lot of that helped the officers be able to build a case and arrest him in October of 2008.
But I think like it's important, if anyone's listening to this and they think they want to know what that is, what you're talking about, I think you have to really understand, like, every red flag that I know of now doing the work was present in her marriage. That none of us saw it. And I think that's important for people who are watching people go through a relationship to understand, because it's very easy to miss. And when you care about someone and you think, okay, this is a contentious divorce. Oh, he would never do really anything to harm her. They're just going through a bad divorce, or, you know, they're going through tough times. Like, you make excuses, but it's important to understand that when they met, she was more successful than him. And she was this big, huge personality, and she didn't rely on him for anything, finances, nothing. And over a series of, I think, calculated maneuvers, he got her into a situation where she was solely responsible, like solely reliant on him for her finances, what have you. And that put him in a position of power. And I don't think you have to give that enough weight, because that is, I think if she remains with her support systems in a position where she's financially self-sufficient and not reliant in that way. I think, could things be different? Maybe. Like, that is a calculated maneuver. And he did it in a series of ways where he lied.
Yep.
And we didn't know they were lies until the court case.
Yeah. For example, Brad said, I'll handle your citizenship request. I can do it through the office. They do this all the time. But of course, he did nothing, because if she was green carded and free to go for work or more free, then the control's broken.
Sure.
And
makes a
he's
lot of
stalking
sense.
her
Yeah.
in her relationship, in her marriage, and she doesn't know.
Yeah.
He's stalking her in their family home. So he's recording phone calls and forwarding emails. And so these legal documents and what have you that she thinks are private information, he's having access to. And so this escalation in behavior is happening, and she's very upset towards the end all the time. And
her communication to Dallas, for example. I should go back there. You asked a question, and I want to go back and answer it in a slightly different way. I was in child welfare work for a lot of years in Canada in my early career. And I understood very clearly what was going on and what the kids needed from having experienced, having to pull kids out of bad situations. And it's always the same: emergency. So when you get your first court order, which is 2 weeks long, you go back. If it's going to extend, it's going to extend for 3 months. And at that point, you make a decision: are we going to go permanent, or are we going to go temporary? And so that process was very important. And I remember two things that the family court judge said that I think affected this case in a miraculous way, because the judge said, I'm going to bring this matter back for trial in October, and you, Brad, will be asked the question, did you kill your wife? And you will be under oath, and you will answer. And he never opened his mouth in court again thereafter.
Yeah, I mean, I remember her saying, because I was there for some of that it was the elephant in the middle of the room. How can we look at this custody case in a vacuum? How can we not think about the fact that he's under investigation, for the murder of his wife? So wheels of justice, as we all know, turn very slowly. This case finally came to trial in 2011. It was long, it was complex, it was heated between the attorneys and the judge, and just lots of twists and turns. I think it was about 8 weeks long, which in my recollection was the longest criminal trial that Wake County had ever tried, at least in modern history. You guys were there. And again, maybe Jill, you weren't there for all of it. I can't remember because you were minding the store.
Yeah.
But what was that like to be in that courtroom? I mean, it was very intense. It was intense for me as a journalist, so it had to be intense for you as a family member.
I think we all felt the tension and the minutiae that got into the trial, and all of the computer stuff, and was it date stamped and wasn't it date stamped, and did someone change it, this or that in the computer, because the computer was a big part of it. Did he really investigate Google to find an abandoned spot where he could dump the body? And the answer, of course, is yes. And we found that. But then, of course, you can get two computer guys who come in and say, oh, no, that's false. Oh, no, that's true. So the argument about that kind of stuff that I had never thought would become as important as it was, because everything was contended.
Yeah, I mean, it was a circumstantial case in terms of not having, physical evidence connecting, which is very difficult in a domestic case because people share a home. So therefore, their DNA and all of that is in locations that would be common for people who share a home. So
I think when you think about that case, though, like, I think the thing that hurt a lot was just the amount of vitriol towards her, and really just questions of character and utilizing certain people who she thought were her friends to speak to certain circumstances that in retrospect you understand that Brad set up to make her look a certain way. And when I think about this, he was very much, and it's ironic because he plays chess, but it was very much a chess game for him. He was putting the pieces in place to make himself successful, and she was living her life. So she didn't understand what was happening. And retrospectively, you watch these people march up and tell these stories about your sister, and you're like, you're a piece right now. Like you're playing the part that he has given you to attest to someone's character that you should know is not true.
And the reality is, whether, we're all human beings, so we listen to stories and they impact us, whether we want to or not. But the reality is, and I've said this a million times, Nancy's character is not supposed to be on trial. That has nothing to do with the crime, right? The crime is the crime. And
Well, and
but I agree with you that became part of the proceedings. So eventually he's convicted in this trial of first degree murder. Were you there that day, Jill? Do you remember? What was that like for all of you?
I had to go to the back because I was too emotional to leave out the front.
Yeah.
And
we were all going to do a little TV piece, and you just couldn't
Yeah.
manage it.
I think I just,
Yeah.
I was just watching this whole thing unfold with the Idaho murders and watching her reaction to just his lack of human decency. And, and I think for me, that was really, I was looking at someone who was at my grad. Like, he was at my wedding. He was a part of every major event I've ever had in my life. I've hugged him more times than I can count. We've shared so many fun times together. I cared about him as a person. And when your sibling gets married and they go away, you're thinking, this is somebody who's going to like love and care for this person. And to just not even have the capacity to take responsibility and apologize and even just tell us why, like what happened, and just treat someone like they're nothing. Like you were just solving a problem for yourself, which is such a narcissistic thing to do. But I couldn't like handle it.
Well, Brad to this day has not had a conversation with any member of our family about the situation, apologized for it. He's acknowledged it in court, but never on a personal level has he said anything.
Yeah, and so that brings me to the next thing. Again, the wheels of justice, we don't control them. In this situation, the case is overturned. It's sent back to the lower court for retrial. And then the district attorney, after, I guess, consulting with all of you and, looking at the case, decides it's safer to plead this case than to retry it. That we're just, it was a big trial. It required a lot of resources, and that there is a chance that this person could be found not guilty. And that wasn't something any of you wanted. So he pleads to second degree murder. He gets time served, which means he's already served some time that goes against that is taken away from the total time. And, he's basically gets out in a couple of years after this. How did you guys make peace with that plea?
Well, I think the two guys who were really important here, one's Howard Cummings, because Howard sat with us and talked about, here's the kind of things that everybody who's found guilty is going to be offered an appeal. He will appeal, and if he does and he wins, then what would you like to do? Well, this is 4 years after or 5 years after the original event, and the kids are getting on in years. They're in school. They've had people who look up their name and online and find out about the family, and so we didn't want any more noise for them than possible. So we said, sure, look, if he wants to plead to second degree, we're fine, but we made 2 criteria. And we said, first of all, he has to acknowledge something that he couldn't have read in the paper. And Judge Gessner, who I also have a lot of respect for, found something, and he asked Brad, did you kill your wife and dump her on Fielding Drive? he wouldn't just let him plead guilty, and Brad had to say yes, but that was never published in the paper where it was. And secondly, he had to give up his rights to parent his kids, because I saw nothing before or after the event that said Brad would have any meaningful role in their lives. And so as a family, we decided, well, let's protect the kids. And that was,
Yeah, and that was always really big for you guys. I know a big part of this because Krista adopted the children.
yeah,
Krista is an identical twin,
right,
so there's a little bit of grace in that, if you will, in that you know, she is now the mother of
yeah,
these children that came from her sister who looked
yeah.
exactly like her. And I know you wanted those kids to grow up and be able to make their own decisions. And so that's happened basically. I mean, they were able to at least grow into young adults, if you will.
Yep. And they've made their own way and they've done well. And so we're pleased with that part. And they've chosen not to go any further with their father, and that's fine with us too.
So he was released from prison in 2021. He's now 51 years old. He's living back in Canada. How do you guys feel about that?
Unsafe. And, I think it's important to talk about also like my mom in that whole process when like just I don't think people understand what a salt of the earth person she was. And during one of his depositions she brought him cake, and when he was pleading out, she just didn't have this bone in her body where she wanted him to rot or anything like that. Like she was willing to accept a lesser outcome to get a better outcome for the kids. And I think that they were both like that, which, allowed us to think like that. But she was just like an angel on earth in that way. And I do think I struggle personally with knowing that he's somewhere around, just because you learn someone is capable of something. I have worried about him being on dating sites and doing this to someone else. I have worried about him finding out where we live and showing up. And, these are just, and I don't know if these are rational thoughts. These are just, I think when you experience something that makes you think that worst case scenario is indeed possible, your brain kind of goes there after that more often than not. So
Yeah, and I think Donna paid a price for Nan's death. That was, she was never totally able to scar it over. And it was more an issue for her than it was for me. I've been sort of a farm kid, and you get hailstorms and cattle that die and all this kind of stuff. So stuff that's meaningful to you, you have to learn to put it aside and carry on. And Donna just had a much tougher time with that than I did.
Yeah, and I knew your wife and your mom, and she was, I mean, just absolutely, like you're saying, the salt of the earth, one of the kindest people, best energy, when you would just see her and hug her. I know she passed away a couple years ago, and I'm really, really sorry for your loss. I think that a parent, but especially a mother who loses a child, I mean, it's a heartbreak that you can't ever, ever get over, even if you have other children, even if you have, grandchildren. How is everybody doing in the wake of Donna's passing? I mean, how has that affected your family?
for me personally, I think I lost two of the people in my life who kind of made me feel like safe, and it just uproots your life. There's like a before that day and an after for me. And I think you keep going and you find meaning and you do different things to get through. And focus on the positive and the happy things in your life, but it's always just right there, like under the surface. And yeah, like I really think he took my sister and my mom at the same time, and there were a lot of big moments in my life that, you know, she wasn't able to be a part of and he wasn't able to be a part of, because you have this other big thing in your life that you're dealing with, and nobody's angry about that. It just, you have this thing that happens that you never ever expected to happen, and then you have to kind of pick up the pieces, and there's all this anger and emotion, and you know, my mom, I give her so much credit because she was able to stay so kind through everything. Like, she never hardened. She just had this heart of gold and she kept it, which I think is very difficult. And she took on a lot of guilt, and I think her mental and physical health really struggled after everything with my sister. And
I agree.
And I think, would that have happened had this not happened? I don't know, maybe not. And it makes you feel like you're robbed of something that you would have taken back in a second. Like, he took a member of our family that any one of us would have just taken back.
Yeah.
You have a lot of involvement in helping domestic violence victims and survivors. I know you did some work here in North Carolina. You've also obviously still continue to do work in Canada. In a way, is that helping you? Is that cathartic for your family? Is that the thing that is in addition to her children, obviously, is Nancy's legacy?
Uh, I think Nancy's legacy is her kids and how amazing her kids are. And that, I think, as a mother of two kids, my heart breaks for them all, because I just, you know, she never got to see what she did, and who she gave birth to, and what amazing humans they are. So I think that's her legacy. I think we saw an opportunity to help women in a way that we truly weren't able to help Nancy. And because when you're in that situation and you don't have the rearview mirror, it's really hard to understand how you can help someone, and what would have been helpful to move her forward.
Yeah.
So we took an opportunity to create a program where we felt like we could marry our learned experience of working with people who have a bit of a different start in life, and moving them towards self-sufficiency financially through employment education. And we married that with our learned experience of what we went through with Nancy. And in that way, I think it's become probably more so our legacy, or how we can give back. And I know for me, it makes me feel like I have a little semblance of control, because you just don't have all the information when you're going through it firsthand. And this makes me feel like I can maybe help people in a way that I should have helped her and didn't.
Yeah. You've been at it, what, 15 years now?
Yeah, 15 years. Yeah.
And remind me how old you were talking about the girls, and without getting into details, not their names or where they're from or anything, or where they are now. How old were the girls and how old are they now, Nancy's girls?
Girls were 5 and
3.
2.
4 and 2, maybe?
4 and 2. 4 and 2, because, yeah, you're right. Or did she just turn 5? No. She was born in 2000.
So my oldest was born in 2000 and she's 25.
Yeah. And
She would have been the closest. Well, actually, then my
Bella's a 04.
Yeah.
Her and my daughter. Okay, sorry, you have to take that.
no, that's fine. My younger one is 22, and she was at the ballet school with
Yep.
the oldest, with Nancy's oldest one.
Yeah, so she's 4 and 2, because it was 2008.
Okay.
She's an 04.
Yeah.
Okay.
She would have just turned 5 because
Yes.
July,
Mine was born in 2003, so that makes sense because they were 1 year apart.
February, and it was
February.
July. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I remember we had the youngest one, the second birthday in Jeff's backyard when we came back home after the first
Right.
order of the family court and before we had to go back for the second trial.
So they're 21 and 19 now.
Yep.
That sound right? Okay. So they're young women off into their own lives, and they get to make their own choices.
I think
Anything I haven't covered, Gary, that you'd like to
Well,
mention?
I'm going to add one. I think that when Jill was talking about the motivation that gets you started, there's always an idea. And we've spent a lot of time working with moms and abused women. And I think one of the things that we came to realize was that the more able you are, the more affluent you are, the more successful in your career, the more you suffer. And that, I think, so it's almost the inverse of the truth. So if you are bringing home, say, a couple $100,000 a year, and you descend to a social assistance living, it's such a radical change. And I think it's one of the sticky pieces that makes it difficult for some women in bad situations to help themselves.
I think it's layered.
Yeah.
I truly think, in the program, I just had 2 women go through. One was had a ton of criminal convictions and a lot of lateral violence, and it was very difficult to find a path forward for her. And I had one who was a master's graduate and a ton of perspective or future options for her, but a ton of mental health barriers. And I think a lot of these women come out of these relationships and they get diagnosed with PTSD and symptoms of people who are coming out of war. And this is just the mental impact of trying to just survive. And when you have to start to think about yourself as somebody who has positive attributes and can do something different with their lives, a lot of times you can't wrap your head around that because the way you've survived in this relationship is being very small. And that is something that I do really recall about towards the end with Nancy. She just was a smaller version of herself, and I think there's competing things that are happening at that moment. And when you leave, that's your highest level of risk when you're in a domestic violence relationship. So she had almost every red flag. If she would have reached out to a resource and if she would have gotten assessed for danger, she would have been very high based on her personal circumstances. And sometimes I think she actually passed away, she died not knowing that that's what she was experiencing. When I think about it, I don't know that she knew she was in a domestic violence relationship. And
Gary, how would you quantify where your family is today? I mean, you guys have experienced a lot. You've come through a lot together.
Well, I think all of us are weakened and strengthened. I think the strength is that you realize that no matter how bad the hit that you take is, if you can survive it, then you have to put it aside and find a new way to cope and carry on. And so I think each of us in our own way has done some adaptation to how we see the world and how we live our lives. So, and that's, I think, a strength. The weakness is that when you realize to your chagrin that you missed things you should have caught, you feel badly for yourself and you try and improve. But there's always that I coulda, shoulda, woulda, that kind of thing strikes you every now and again. And as Jill said, if we had knew then what we know now, the likelihood is we could have had a different outcome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's trauma. Just look at trauma and what it does to people, right? It implodes your family, it implodes you, your other relationships, your sense of security, your sense of safety, your capacity to trust people. If I think about every single aspect of my life has probably been affected, and due to a choice I never made. And then you just kind of rebuild. And like you try to like be like Donna, you know, just be kind and just try to stay soft and stay kind, you know, and live in a way that maybe would make her proud, or both of them. And yeah.
And at some point, you gotta forgive yourself. I mean, we're all gonna miss something, and you're gonna feel badly for it later, but if you don't forgive yourself and keep stacking the burden on yourself, then you just destroy yourself. So you have to be able to make a decision and carry on, and you know, and that's part of what strengthens you.
And I think if you were to talk to like Kristen and Jeff and everyone else involved, like they probably have very different answers. That's what's difficult, I think, right? Like how anyone experiences trauma and hard things is how anyone experiences that thing. So I know how I feel, he knows how he feels, they know how they feel, and it's just difficult. You just miss them and you wish it was different, but it's not, so you just move forward.
Thank you guys so much for your time and for sharing, Nancy, with us and your story. And I'm so glad that everyone's doing well and that the grandkids are all growing up and doing their own things. And it's just great to talk to you.
Well, it's good to talk to you again. It's been a while.
Yeah, good to catch up. Thanks for having us and letting us share her and who she was.